Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Give people a chance to come in. There we go. Excellent. Hi, and my head is cut off. It figures. Let's do a little adjusting. Oh dear. How's that? It's not going to be any better, I don't think. Let's see. Well, it's quite delayed, but it will do. Hi, David, and hello, everybody. If you could, please invite your followers. And today we are doing the legal consent and abuse in BDSM. And the reason why all of this came up in the first place was we had gone to a munch recently, and it was brought up that there had been a person who had been attending munches and events that was taking advantage of new women and apparently had sexually abused a couple of them, as far as we know. This is like second, third-hand information, but I don't want to mention names or anything because we are sort of looking into all this, but the fact that there are people out there taking advantage is really, really bad. So we thought that it would be a good idea to talk about this topic as far as what really is consent, what really is abuse, and like when has a dom gone too far in what they're doing. So I am with Jay, and probably everybody knows Jay from prior scopes. He has been an EMT. He did some medical school. He has been in law school. He's been a law professor. He's currently an author and author of the best-selling book on BDSM, SM 101. And so we basically have an expert here to talk on the subject, and he does have some ideas and opinions here. So, God, I can't believe there's only a few people in this room. I almost want to restart and try again. But we will continue, and it's just the way it goes for now. Hopefully people will catch things on the replay. And yes, exactly. All right, so I don't know. What do you want to? Do you want to start with anything here? Let's just wing it for right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for that very nice introduction. I had sort of an epiphany about 10 years ago in terms of how I viewed BDSM play. I'm a student of outcomes. I think it can be fairly said that what we want from our play is a good outcome. So there's good outcomes and there's bad outcomes. I came up with the concept of the minimally acceptable outcome. If it's not at least this good, we're not going to sign off on it.
Right.
And I decided that the minimally acceptable outcome was 3 days after the scene is over, everybody with what legal types might call an interest in the scene feels basically okay about it. You know, the participants feel basically okay about it. if they're not in a monogamous relationship, their partners feel okay about it. If it happened at a place base, the place base staff feels basically okay about it. It's all good. Because I think a lot of us have probably had it happen. You do a scene, and when it's over, for one reason or another, at least one person is not feeling okay about what happened. And hopefully,
Right.
they can get together with the other person, they can talk things through, and they get it resolved. Now, hopefully we get an outcome much better than that. But I think that establishes a rational floor.
Right. Though it would seem that up front there should have been some kind of negotiation as far as what was acceptable, not acceptable behavior on both parts, and that had something not gone the way it was supposed to, that somebody would have spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
during the scene.
Actually, far and away, the number one cause of failing to pass the 3-day test is inadequate pre-play negotiations, particularly with a new partner.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's other things, like sometimes there's an accident, like an eye bolt pulls loose or something like that, but the huge percentage of the time, poor negotiations are at the core of a failure to pass the 3-day test.
Okay. So, I guess taking, for example, this person that we know is doing what they're doing, what are people supposed to do about this, and how is it going to ever get fixed if you know, nobody is speaking up? Organizations don't do anything about it, or he isn't prosecuted by those he abused.
Well, in that particular instance, the misbehavior, which has been reported by multiple independent sources,
Right.
it's not even really a BDSM thing, actually. He's doing things like going to social areas of an event, and he's grabbing women by the breasts and by the crotch.
Yes.
Well, everybody still has their clothes on, and he's been, and actually the community has already sanctioned him to a significant degree. There's a growing number of events that he's just no longer allowed at.
True. But as we also discussed, he has been asked to leave, and in some cases has actually come back to certain functions, and is repeating this cycle of trying to, I guess, pick up new women at munches, that kind of thing. So,
but I'm a bit surprised to hear that they're actually letting him in again.
that's what I don't understand, is either the coordinator of the munch or the event is different, doesn't know, or somewhere it's broken.
Yeah, that's a very, very strange occurrence, and that raises an inference of negligence on the part of the person putting on the event.
Exactly. And also it would seem like it would be proper to be informing all of the local events about this person in advance, so that you know, the situation could be preempted rather than waiting for it to occur again.
Yeah, I predict something like that is going to happen. I mean, we do have some good photographs of this guy.
Oh yeah, we do.
Which could be sent to the various event holders and stuff like that.
Exactly. So, has Janice been made aware of this? Any of the officers at Janice? Janice, by the way, is an organization in the Bay Area for BDSM community, and it's actually a pretty large membership from my understanding, and they put on events. They also have a calendar which lists pretty much every event going on in the area, including all the munches from all the other groups as well that are in the Bay Area. So, I mean, they pretty much blanket the whole Bay Area for what we do, and it would seem like it would be prudent for officers there to be contacted and information passed around.
We do have to be a little careful in this respect, because we don't want to set people on, this guy has money. Okay.
That is true.
And we don't want to set someone up.
Or at least we assume he has money based on his profession.
Yes.
Right. Which we're not going to say anything about this person name-wise or anything here, because until, these are all just allegations until proven.
But we don't want to put somebody in a position where they're vulnerable to a defamation lawsuit by this guy.
That is true. And we don't want to encourage other people to go out and look for this guy and possibly do something,
Now, there are a number of ways this could be dealt with. Right now, well, I have an essay in the works called Bad Behavior, Allegations Thereof, and Intra-Community Due Process.
Right.
Because right now, we really don't have a functional due process regarding allegations of bad behavior, which leaves us, well, what we've got right now, frankly, is a mess. We've got a number of false positives. For example, person A might have a community political difference with person B. And so person A goes around the community saying, watch out for them, they're a terrible person,
right,
they're an abuser, or so forth and so on. And, that, assuming there's not reasonable facts to support that, person A is now vulnerable to a defamation lawsuit. Right now we have numerous, regarding allegations of bad behavior, we have numerous false positives and false negatives. It came out a while back that a pretty well-known presenter at the national level was in fact a serial rapist.
Oh yes, right, yes.
Yeah,
this was pretty much all over the press, right?
Yeah. But and then there are false negatives. I guess somebody with a personal grudge about another person spreading false rumors about them.
Right.
It would actually be possible to, well, the question is, what can we do about it?
Exactly. That's the whole point of this conversation.
One of the things we can do about it is we can regulate who is and who is not welcome at certain events. Like if
right,
you could create a sort of mediation type of hearing where a person who had accusations of bad behavior over them would have a chance to show up and tell their side of it. When I was in law school, I had a friend who was very, very badly treated by a nonprofit that he did a lot of volunteer work for. And after a while, they told him, well, your volunteer services just aren't needed anymore. And you would think that a volunteer position would be the ultimate in an at-will employment sort of thing. And that's actually not true. There's a cause of action called wrongful expulsion from a social group.
Okay.
Which basically says, oh, well, groups can be very, very selective about who they let in and on what basis. But once a person is a member of that group, that they acquire a property interest in that membership. And as we know...
do we know if this person is a member of Janus?
The case I worked on when I was in law school didn't have a kink aspect to it.
Right.
But basically, because connections are made and so forth, the person's now deprived of that ability.
Jay is a lawyer. He doesn't just talk like one. He is a lawyer.
But because of social and business connections that get made doing volunteer work, the volunteer acquires a property interest in their membership, which basically means that they are entitled to a hearing before anything really major is done about their membership.
Right.
So, but once a hearing is held, if it's reasonably fair, then it wouldn't be defamation to tell people that person X got kicked out of Club Y because some allegations of bad behavior on person X's part were substantiated.
Yes.
In a hearing.
Right.
Also, consent is a defense to defamation. Okay, yeah, write whatever you want to write about me. That would actually be a defense. And back in the 90s, when I was running my own private party group, one of the items on the waiver was a statement, I agree that the club president may notify others of any perceived misbehavior on my part.
Well, that's because you're a damn lawyer.
Well, consent is a defense, and I've got the signed waiver, and so I haven't documented that this person consented to that. And the thing about it is that it doesn't even have to be a substantiated allegation.
Well, yeah, that's true. Not if you signed a paper saying you agree for...
Now, it wouldn't be okay or legally safe for me to lie about this, to tell the other party givers that this guy had done something, or this woman. We've certainly got our fair share of female predators in this community. I know more than one who should be in prison.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Blackmail, among other things. Anyhow.
Interesting.
As long as I'm reporting in good faith, that's sufficient. Yeah, I wouldn't be protected if I lied, but as long as I had some reasonable grounds to communicate this, now the person has consented to that.
Right. So, oh God, so where do we go from here? I mean, personally, I think we need to contact officers in Janus and make this known. We need to try to find these two women that had this happen to them. And, well, obviously, they're probably, I mean, I doubt seriously that they would even consider prosecuting, and then, or would they?
Well,
this was at a private party, correct? When this happened.
Yes. Well, apparently there were numerous instances of this. I think it might be at least 3 women.
Right.
And these were 3 women who actually went to the trouble of complaining. So who knows how many other women
Exactly.
were affected by this guy's bad behavior.
Right.
But it doesn't, touching someone without their consent is battery, which is both a crime and a tort.
Yes. Okay.
But while it would be up to the district attorney's office to make a decision as to whether or not to prosecute this individual, he could be looking at being taken to civil court. Like in California, the jurisdictional limit of small claims court in California is $10,000, which to most people is a significant chunk of change.
Yeah, but probably not to this person.
Well, who knows? Anyway.
Right, that's true.
If this guy non-consensually gropes a woman,
exactly,
and she takes him to small claims court, which is very cheap to do, and is kept very, very simple in terms of the procedures involved.
right.
If she wins a judgment against him, even if she just wins a nominal damages $1 judgment against him, it wouldn't be defamation for her to then tell people, hey, I sued this idiot and I won. Because that's factually true, and truth is a defense
Right.
to defamation.
I see what you're saying. So, I mean, ideally it would be nice to see this guy prosecuted, though it doesn't seem likely that would happen. It would be also nice to make sure that he doesn't do this again in our community, though my guess is he'll find somewhere else to do this either way.
There is that risk. The question becomes, what can we do about it? And something we can do about it is regulate who's welcome at our events.
Right.
And we can notify others.
Right.
Like, for example, a lot of people who are active in the kink community are also active in the poly community.
Yes.
So notifications go out to people who put on polyamory events.
Right. So, well, it appears that, I mean, that obviously some people have already tried to limit his participation in some events.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he has repeatedly gone back when he's been told not to come back indicates that it's not working.
That's really of concern. That's really of concern.
It is. It drives me crazy, actually.
And we haven't confirmed that he did in fact return after being told to leave?
That's what, when we were at the munch, there were 2 people that said that they know of at least 2 other munches that he returned to after he was told to never come back. One of them being the Oakland munch at, I can't remember the name of the bar. It's like
I know.
during the breakfast or...
Yeah, that's on like Saturday
the
morning
brunch
or
thing.
something.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Crunch? I think
Yeah,
they
the
call it.
Crunch.
Crunch,
Exactly, in
okay.
Oakland. So I know that was one that I remembered. I don't remember the other one. But the fact that he, that 2 people have mentioned this out of the 6 that were there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's disturbing.
it is disturbing. That's
Well,
why.
As a very practical matter, one of the things that's true, one of the things is that is hugely true, is that at what I guess you might call relatively heterosexual events, sex-positive events, thrive or wither as a direct function of how comfortable women feel in attending that event.
Exactly.
And
it's obviously where he's directing his attention.
And so if somebody, isn't properly respectful, toward a woman, not only is she less likely to return, but she's probably going to tell about 20 of her closest gal pals
Yep.
about it.
Pretty much, yeah.
I've actually seen it a time or two actually reach that logical conclusion that you show up and it's all guys, not one single woman attended, which generally means that the event is going to go out of existence
Pretty quickly.
pretty soon thereafter. Just
Yep.
no, women are the lifeblood of relatively heterosexual, sex-positive events. They just
Yep.
are.
I agree, David. So, do you guys have any questions here? I sort of have been missing some of the comments. So, if you do, I'll pay attention more.
Would you like for me to speak on consent as a matter of law?
Sure.
Okay, there's a lot of buzz around consent these days, and I view that as I view that as a good thing.
They're asking when you're going to write another book.
Oh, I'm working on some now. Anyway, they're talking about consent culture. There's like FetLife group called Consent Counts and so forth.
Uh-huh.
And I'm writing an essay titled Consent is a Matter of Law. In other words, this is the hardcore of it. From consent as a matter of law, we can branch out into consent in terms of social custom, branch out on our consent in terms of personal habit, and so forth. But consent as a matter of law, that's pretty hardcore. It took a surprising amount of time to actually adequately research this issue. I thought that I could just simply open up a law dictionary and there'd be a definition of consent, and I could just copy that down, and that would be it.
No Wikipedia entry.
I forget, actually. But basically, as a matter of law, consent has three major parts. Okay, the first part is consent can be defined as a mentally competent, informed, limitable, revocable willingness. And we'll go on into those later. Second part is to have a legally protected interest. And the third part is affected by the behavior of another person.
Okay.
So let's unpack that. First of all, the consent has to be given by someone who is mentally competent, which means they're conscious. They're not so impaired on drugs or alcohol that they don't reasonably understand what's going on. They're not so young or so old and feeble-minded,
Yes.
et cetera. So,
Yep.
so they have to have a reasonable capacity to mentally understand what's involved.
Makes
And
perfect sense.
there's not what we call in law a bright line test for that. Like, under the law, if your blood alcohol is higher than 0.08, or maybe if it is 0.08, I forget, that's drunk driving by definition. It doesn't matter how well you had your car under control and stuff like that. If you blow up higher than a 0.08, you're going to pick up a DUI. There's no similar test to evaluate a person's ability to consent. So each issue each instance has to be judged on a case-by-case basis. Certainly people out there who are perhaps experienced drinkers could blow up 0.09 and still be perfectly lucid enough.
Yes.
To-
that was
to
me at
consent.
least 30 years ago.
Okay, all right. So the second point is the consent must be reasonably informed. The person must have a reasonable idea of what's being proposed here. And among other things, that means the person doing the proposing has to be truthful in what they are saying. Like if you get some male dom who wants to single tail a woman and he says, hey, I've got 5 years of experience in using single tails, when in fact he's got less than an hour total experience in using single tails, her consent would not be valid because her consent was induced by fraud.
Right.
There's a legal saying that fraud voids all transactions.
There you go. Okay.
The next aspect...
Transparency is key, yeah.
The next aspect is consent can be limited. For example, you could tell someone, okay, you can touch me above the waist, but not below the waist.
Right.
And that would be valid.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, and consent has to be revocable.
Sure, of course.
Okay, you can just say...
You can change your mind at any time.
You can. It would be very important to make sure that a limitation of scope of consent or a withdrawal of consent was clearly and unambiguously communicated to the other party. You know, if you're laying there inside your head thinking, maybe if you had previously consented to something and now you're laying there inside your head saying, I don't want to do this, I revoke my consent, I revoke my consent.
Right.
That's not going to be sufficient. That revocation has to be communicated.
There have been plenty of cases where you say no and they still try and continue until no becomes more than no.
That's true.
So,
you know, well, we certainly don't see this in just the kink and poly communities, but I think we've all had run-ins with people who think that the stated limits are not actually the real limits, and they will push and push until they get a fairly emphatic no.
exactly right. Yeah, or a slap across the face, or
Right.
I'm get up and leave, or any number of other things that happen.
Right, right. And the final aspect of the first point is that the consent must be willing. Now, in legalese, what that means is that the person giving their consent is not under duress. Now, duress in law has a fairly specific meaning, which is a credible threat of immediate physical harm to the person or to someone they're very close to.
There you go.
But it has to be a credible threat of immediate harm. You
So
know,
is that physical or psychological harm?
physical? Physical.
So psychological harm doesn't count. Because it can occur.
It can. That would be trickier. There's a tort called intentional infliction of emotional distress, and you might look at pursuing a course of action on that. But the general rule is we're talking about, you know, physical harm.
Yeah.
You know, blow me or I'll kill your baby, and the baby's right there. That would be under duress, and duress can be a defense to any crime other than murder.
Right. Right. And then, of course, there's always, you know, people, they push consent until it turns to abuse. You know, and that does happen more than regularly.
Now, the second part of the consent definition is that it must affect a legally protected interest. In other words, if the consent is breached, the offender could find themselves standing in front of somebody wearing a black robe, asking them to explain themselves.
I say yes.
And you have legally protected interests in item 1, your peace of mind. So if someone does an assault, which is either a battery attempt that fails, or they make the person think they're about to get struck with something, like if they run up to them and pull a baseball bat over their head, and the person goes, ooh, you know. So you have a legally protected interest in your peace of mind. You have a legally protected interest in your property, both your real property and your personal property.
Yes.
Okay. You have a legally protected interest in your privacy. You know, like that case that came down a couple of weeks ago where this lowlife had managed to fit a video camera over the peephole in a hotel room.
Yes.
And got nude photographs of a
very publicized case.
Yeah, of a fairly. I think she was a sports announcer or something, and the jury just brought back like a $55 million verdict.
Yes, they did
on that. If memory serves, I heard her saying that that case has caused substantial ripples, particularly among women who travel. Like women who travel are now like putting a piece of cloth or something over the peephole,
right?
So that some other lowlife can't fill that. And you have a legally protected interest in your reputation. Somebody's going around saying bad things about you that are false. Right. You can sue them for defamation. There are other property interests, of course, but those are the major ones. Right. And the final point about consent as a matter of law is that the breach must have been done by another human being. You know, if your crazoid ex takes a baseball bat to your car, that's both a crime and a tort. They could end up sued in both, well, they could end up having to go to both civil and criminal court. If your car gets struck by lightning and is destroyed, well, sorry about that.
Yes.
Although we did cover a case in civil procedure, guy had his property damaged by an act of God, and his insurance policy didn't include acts of God. So this wingnut actually tried to sue God.
Right.
He actually tried to bring God to federal court for damaging his property, and the case got dismissed because the plaintiff couldn't properly document that he had reasonably served a subpoena on the defendant.
Okay. All right. Well, getting back to the BDSM portion of this, there was one other aspect of this whole thing I wanted to cover,
Sure.
which was related to the DSM-5. And for those that don't know what the DSM is, that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. And this sort of applies to, you know, when is a dom gone too far, or pretty much when has anybody gone too far, and then it becomes a mental disorder. And so it's changed recently. I mean, it used to be atypical sexual behaviors were all considered disorders. I don't know, not really that much, not that long ago.
I think go back to DSM-3.
To DSM-3, exactly, which is like, I don't know, to at least 20 years ago. So pretty much what we do now is still classified as atypical behavior, but is not a problem. I mean, long as it's consensual and between adults, it's not a problem. Until, and I'm literally just going to read this right from the updated DSM-5. So it only becomes an actual disorder and problem when the person feels personal distress about their interest, not merely distress from society's disapproval. So obviously, just because the public doesn't think it's the right thing to do, it's only really in your mind when it becomes you think this is a problem, that you're sort of crossing the line into the land of disorders. Or you have a sexual desire or behavior that involves another person's psychological distress, injury, or death. or a desire for sexual behaviors involving unwilling persons or persons unable to give legal consent, such as minors. I just wanted to point that out, that there is actually a legal limit when a dom has gone too far as when it then turns into, this guy's not just a masochist, but this guy could possibly be a serial killer on top of it all. So I just wanted to make that point. I think we've gone almost an hour here, so I think we will just wrap it up at this point. I want to thank Jay for coming back again and again and again and doing these, and hopefully people will catch this in the replay, because the crowd has really been, unfortunately, I don't know what's going on with Periscope lately. Hello, did I miss this? Hi, Laura. Yeah, you missed it. You'll just have to catch the replay. So
I have something I'd like to add in
Sure.
terms of
Not a problem.
resources.
Sure. I know, nobody gets notified anymore.
I say this with some frequency, that the saddest surprise I've had, I started studying law about 16 years ago,
Right.
is I'm learning more about psychopaths than I ever wanted to know. Along with the other personality disorders. You show me a bitter legal dispute, civil or criminal, and almost without exception, I can show you a psychopath, a narcissist, a borderline, or a bipolar.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, and that, but particularly to people with borderline personality disorder, or people who are bipolar. I've had some people close to me in my life who were bipolar.
Yeah,
and
me too.
They struggled with it as best they could. I've got a friend who's diagnosed with borderline personality disorder,
Me too.
and she really tries to behave appropriately. The narcissists and the psychopaths, I have a harder time dredging up a lot of sympathy for.
I would tend to agree with that.
The thing is, people with these conditions engage in certain telltale behaviors that people without these conditions don't engage in. And by learning these behavioral tells,
Yes.
you can protect yourself to a substantial degree. I had a long talk about this about a year ago with a
Would you
lady
like to tell us what some of these things
Sure.
are, real
Sure.
quick?
But I had a long talk about this with a lady friend of mine about a year ago, and I heard back from her about 6 weeks later. She goes, I started seeing someone, but thanks to those things you recommended, I was able to spot much earlier in the game than I normally would have that this guy was either a psychopath or a narcissist, and she got herself out of that relationship much sooner than she normally would have. Anyhow, there's a good website, psychopath3.com.
Cool.
And there are 3 books in particular that are good references. The first is Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. Gavin runs an agency that protects celebrities from stalkers. And he's learned the telltale behaviors of someone who's a benign fan, someone who's an obnoxious fan, and someone who's a dangerous fan.
Right.
And so he can triage people pretty accurately, pretty quickly by observing their behavior. There's another book called Say Goodbye to Your PDI, which stands for Personality Disordered Individual.
Okay.
And it's a layperson's guide to the major personality disorders. And there are checklists,
Right.
behavioral checklists, like, okay, they're engaging in this behavior, are they engaging in that behavior?
Right.
And a very similar book is called Emotional Vampires.
Okay.
And once again, they list various pathologies and give the reader tips.
So can you give us a couple of what these would be as examples?
Okay, here's one. You are never going to get a sincere apology out of a psychopath or a narcissist. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
Because in their mind, they can do no wrong.
Right.
So if something happens that's clearly a wrong, they will frame it so that it's not their fault. I mean, I had a case some years ago, a guy who was strangling his sub with the sash cord from a bathrobe, and she actually safe worded on him, and he basically said, "Safe word hell, you're going out," and strangled her all the harder, and he actually broke the hyoid bone in her neck.
Oh my God, crazy.
And then he turned around and got mad at her, since she's got a few years on her, for having brittle bones, and told her that he was going to have to start playing with younger submissives because she had become too physically frail to play at his level.
Right. Okay. That's pretty nuts. That is pretty nuts. So, there is so next week, actually, I think I may do a scope on paraphilia and fetishism, and we'll do some descriptions of that, and because they are two separate things. People often confuse one with the other, and there is some crossover, but there are some distinct differences between fetishism and paraphilias. So I'll sort of go over that next week, and hopefully I will be prepared on that. So that should be fun. It is more of a fun thing, and maybe I'll do a little paraphilia quiz, and we'll give you some goofy names and see if you can figure out exactly what they might be. So so that could be a little bit more fun than what I've been doing lately. Which I think I've been more or less boring lately, and plus I've skipped a bunch of scopes. So I'm going to try to get my act together here a little bit better, and I sure wish Periscope would get their act together too. This has been a little ridiculous. So I'm going to say goodbye for today, and I think we're done. So thanks, everybody. Okay, let's kill it.